Because I don't think anyone's really, I mean, if you ask the average Muslim, I don't think the average Muslim is ignorant to the fact that the Christians believe in the Trinity. I don't believe that. And I don't believe the average Christian is ignorant of that Islam is a very strong faith built upon the understanding of the unicity of Allah. I don't think really there's that difference. I don't think there's ignorance in that sense. I think there's more of a social ignorance, but not a theological ignorance. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin.
One more question before there, please, before giving a question.
Hi. I wanted to make a comment and a question, ask your opinion on it. I completely agree with you when I first saw the news about the caricatures coming out in England about the Prophet ﷺ. I thought the same. I couldn't understand why the Muslims, as a nation of people, were so outraged when every day we see blood being shed in Palestine and in Iraq, and mass graves being dug up in Bosnia until this day, and that didn't outrage them when their Muslim brothers and sisters' blood was being shed. Yet a cartoon could do that. But then as time went on and I carried on watching the news, and I noticed peaceful protests demanding that it was an insult and that it shouldn't really be allowed to be shown in newspapers in England. Yet the way that the media portrays the negative images of a minority of people who were Muslim, and the way that they dressed in these protests and how offensive they were to everyone else, it's like no matter how you try, or like you're saying, we should be responsible for our actions, and a lot of this is to blame because of how the Muslims portray themselves, and we should lead by example. But despite what you do, a small minority will always remain in the wrong, and because of that, the media illuminates that to shine on all of Muslims in general. And then I realised that it wasn't just a matter of a simple picture and a caricature, that it was more the icing on the cake, or it was an erupting volcano in recent events that have gone on in the world about Islamophobia and regarding things as Iraq and Palestine and Bosnia, and continuous things where we do feel like we are being attacked. So this was the icing on the cake that managed to unify Muslims and say enough is enough. And do you not think that maybe we should stand up, obviously in a peaceful way, and maybe like some Arab states did, ban Denmark politics? You can channel your energies into a more useful way by still portraying Islam as a good and respectable deed. But then, in the whole light of freedom of speech, it doesn't, it seems that freedom of speech only works for the other side, but not towards Islam. And regarding the lecturer, he is meant to be a role model for students, and a lecturer who denounces Islam and says that black people are inferior, genetically inferior, intelligence-wise to white people, then how is he going to mark his papers regarding black students and Muslims? And, there needs to be some fair playing ground, and that doesn't seem to be the case of the environment at the moment.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. There were a number of points that were raised about the situation with the lecturer who has allegedly been involved in some racist or anti-Islamic activity. Some points raised about the protests and other things. I understand the points. The points are well taken, and although certainly I don't agree with all the points, I can understand the general thrust of the intention behind the points. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you.
Okay, one question on the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Hanbali, for seeking to help. Can I ask you what you know of the role of the two Danish imams, Abu Laban and Akbar Akari, in seeking to inflame international Muslim opinion by adding to the Protestant forces with some appalling, obscene cartoons that were never published by
Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. The question is, do I know of the two Danish imams who had published the actual situation with the cartoons in the Muslim world and an inflamed opinion to what we see now? I'm not aware of those particular individuals. I've only heard very little of them. One of them. Yeah, I've heard that there is evidence that there had been some actual purposeful intent in these things, but I hadn't really studied over it carefully, so I have to just reserve judgment until I actually look over the issue. I have to be an honest researcher as best I can.
Okay. Yes, are you here, please?
I think the cartoon controversy and how it was portrayed in the so-called free press was actually an issue of freedom of speech at all, and I think it was an issue of racism. And it's racism and anti-Islamophobia that's obviously been fostered recently, especially to support illegal imperialist invasions, specifically the Iraq War. And how far, in your opinion, can relations improve unless Islamophobia and anti-imperialist campaigns are linked, like the Stop the War Coalition, like the SEF? I just think these things have to be linked up.
Alhamdulillah, salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. The question is being asked regarding the anti-Islamic attacks that are in the press, and how perhaps if there's a possibility of a link between various political parties. I have to say with quite a bit of honesty, I'm not a politician by practice or principle, but and I leave that to them. I leave that to their situation, because I've never seen a hospital built because of politics, and I've never seen the streets where I came from where between 1988 and 1992 17,500 people from my generation were killed. I have no graduating class. All 60 of my friends are dead. No politician, no political party can change that. But faith and an honest uprising and principles based upon sound foundational orthodox values can. And that's part of what I'm about, and that's part of why I'm here.
Yes, please.
I'd like to ask that if the Muslims stopped concentrating on trivial, unimportant things like dress and external practices, they concentrated on Tawheed, not committing riba, and also things like, which I find very important, adab, mannerisms of Prophet Muhammad. And not just adab, but also like certain etiquettes and also their correct articles of faith. And if they actually behave and try to be more like Muhammad in their mannerisms, and they concentrate less on, I'm not saying clothes are not important, but they're spending too much importance on unimportant things, then groups like Combat Team, the National Front, the British National Party, they wouldn't be talking about sending all the Muslims back or declaring a war against Islam. And in fact, if anything, quite a few members of the far right have actually met some real Muslims, and they're absolutely amazed by them. But the thing is, if every single Muslim could be more like Prophet Muhammad, surely groups like this would have no excuse to attack the Muslims.
Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. It's just a comment that's being put forward by the speaker that mainly there tends to be less of a stress upon foundational orthodox principles and values of theology, and more of a stress on peripheral issues or fruits of faith such as clothing and other manners. Whereas if we were actually focusing more upon principles, issues that are foundational, that we could actually progress further and be stronger, and we would be less open to attack from outside forces, and would be able to better ourselves internally. I agree with that point. I think it's a valid point. And with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the success, and I think that we should concentrate on the foundational points. Alhamdulillah.
Okay, move on to ring questions now. We can get to you afterwards, please. I'll be waiting. Question is, what are the three most crucial qualities of the beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. The three most crucial qualities are, first of all, the fact that his speech, if you look in the Ashifa and other works done on his life, when you look at the evidence surrounding his life, number one, the Prophet Muhammad was described as fasih. Fasih can mean eloquence, but it can also sometimes mean boldness, and it can also at other times mean frankness. He was frank, he was brazen, he was bold, he was straightforward, but he was also honest and fair. So that's one of the first things about him, is that he was straightforward. So he told people the truth honestly. He didn't sugarcoat, he didn't water things down, but he also wasn't provocative. He didn't seek to provoke people, but he told the truth. A second critical aspect about the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the next quality about him, is that he was reliable. It's mentioned in Sahih al-Jami' and Hadith al-Sahih that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam once agreed to meet a man for an appointment. and the man didn't show up. And the Messenger of Allah ﷺ actually waited a day and a half for the man. So he was reliable. He showed up early for his appointments. He was trustworthy. And some of us need to consider that, because sometimes how many appointments have we been late for? Sometimes it becomes proverbial that we're known to be late. There was a Muslim brother I knew in London. We said the only thing you're not going to be late for is the Day of Judgment, because you've got to be there. You have no option. And he found that humorous, but it was also telling, because it became a situation where he was actually strongly influenced by lateness. The third quality about the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was his outstanding character towards other people. I've already discussed enemies. I think part of his character towards his actual wives and his household, when it's mentioned in the Sahih of Imam Bukhari that he yakhdimu ahl baytihi, that he used to help the women in his house. He used to look after them. He used to do different things like this. See, he would help, he would clean, he would do things. And sometimes we think that it's beneath us to help out with certain things or to do certain things, and we have to get out of that mold. Because the Prophets, alayhim salatu wasalam, they never thought it was below them to do these things. And we have to learn to get past the stereotypes. Oh no, I could never be seen doing that. Well, don't worry, brother. Allah will see you, and inshallah you'll be rewarded. Don't worry about anybody else. And get on with doing it, and be an upright believer. If it's nothing haram she's asked you to do, get on with it.
Next question. What do you think were the intentions of the artist, and what was he trying to communicate?
Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. Normally, if you open someone's chest up without anesthesia, they die. I don't want to try to do that with the artist to find out what was in his heart and what he was thinking. I don't know. And it is a good question, because sometimes people do ridiculous things, or they do things that are seemingly offensive. Maybe they were trying to push some envelope. Maybe they were trying to get across some understanding that they thought needed to be put across, or maybe they were just trying to be just plain funny. I don't know. But what I can say is, whatever it was, I think whoever is responsible in detail realizes now, good Lord, what an explosion. And is either thinking to himself, boy, it'd be great to see another one of those, or, boy, let's not do that again. I hope at least he's thinking the second.
Okay, so two questions, we'll say them together. First of all, do you think this has any link to a political conspiracy, seeing the current negative sentiments towards Islam all over the world, to add fuel to the existing fire? And as a response to this controversy, there has been a ban on Danish products. What do you think of this?
Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. As far as a conspiracy, it's very difficult to prove conspiracies, because there are so many other differing layers and aspects that can be argued. As far as there being an undercurrent of anger against Islam, I can see that in certain instances that has existed, and that it is happening now. As far as the ban on Danish products, if you're asking me what I personally do, I don't really do any of those things, because most of the things that are banned, for the most part, I don't eat. I mean, a lot of the sweets that the Danish eat, a lot of the white sugar, I hardly ever eat white sugar. I hardly ever eat most of the soft drinks and fizzy things, which actually the stearic acid is enough to burn a hole in your stomach. I don't really eat those things, and I don't drink them. So it's not an issue of boycotting it for me, because I don't eat them from the beginning, because I don't, the particular jurisprudential or fiqh position that I take is I don't classify that as food. That's the actual fiqh thing. I don't classify it as food, and the main scholars that I tend to take from, they don't call it food either. Someone offered, like, one of the teachers, he was doing a lecture on fiqh, and they offered him a curry, and he said, why are you trying to poison me? And that's not a slight on anybody's food or any culture or anything else, but it's the fact of these spicy things and all these other things, it can actually damage you. And these fizzy drinks and everything else, I don't really classify it as food. I'm not saying it's haram, but I don't classify it as food in the sense of it being wholesome, because part of what's halal is what's also tayyib, which means that it's also wholesome. And so if it's not wholesome, I don't really classify it as real food, not in a real sense. And so as far as the boycott, I don't really see much of an effect, because it doesn't have an effect on my life or my family's life, because we don't really deal with it. As far as the usefulness of it, I don't know, because I think there are some much more severe things that we can worry about and do, and that we should be focused on. rather than the Danish products, because the Danes as an entire nation